everyone. Welcome to the Black to Business podcast. I am so excited. Today we have a very special guest, Miss Sherrell Dorsey. Thank you for joining us, Sherrell.
Thank you so much for having me. I'm really excited to be on the show this evening.
Of course. And I just have to say how I first met Sherrell. I met her about a year ago at the Gravity Empower Her conference. And I just remember her speaking about her platform, ThePLUG, and just how passionate she was, but also how there was a need and how she was feeling that need. So I'm excited to have her. And just to give you a little background about Sherrell, she's the founder of, like I mentioned before, ThePLUG, which is the first daily tech newsletter, which covers founders and innovators and investors of color. She also writes articles and stories on tech and entrepreneurship, as well as social impact. So we're excited. To have you. So Sherrell, I know I mentioned a little bit, but please just start from the beginning. Who is Sherrell Dorsey?
Yes, I really love that question because everybody needs an existential question in their life to reevaluate who they are. Again, my name is Sherrell Dorsey. I am a technology journalist and entrepreneur, but most of all, I'm a lifelong learner. So I've done several things within the tech space, including working at Uber, working on contract with Google Fiber, and a host of experiences within the tech community. And I've also run some consultancies with different STEM organizations. And so I've had vast experience in this space looking at things as far as in deep as digital inclusion, and then also applying a lens of data to the way that we track and measure what is happening with communities of color in this space.
Definitely. So you have a journalism background. If you could just go into how did you go into tech? What was that transition like, your interest on tech, and then how you started ThePLUG?
Yep. So I actually started off learning how to code in high school, part of a program called the Technology Access Foundation. The program actually got launched in 96 by a retired Microsoft software engineer, Trish Malines-Zico. And that program has since gone from just an after-school program teaching kids to code to a full-fledged STEM academy, award-winning STEM academy. And so, she diagnosed this issue around kids of color being in the technology fields about 20 years ago. So right now it's very blitzy, very campaigny, and definitely something needed. But 20 years ago, she saw this issue and decided to do something about it. And so that gave me the opportunity to learn programming languages, work at Microsoft every summer as a high school intern, and then also graduate with this skill set going into college with the ability to program computers, being able to set up networks and what have you. And so that was sort of my early on, it was my early on introduction to technology. And I happen to live in Seattle, Washington. So it was fairly simple for me to get involved with sort of the Microsoft environment, Expedia, Amazon, what have you. So that was always something that I took with me, whether I was in an internship, working with beauty brands and startups. I was always extremely entrepreneurial and loved this idea that we could actually create businesses that help to serve the community or serve humanity or have some sort of a positive impact. So that was sort of this lifelong mission. I'll say that I've kind of been preparing to be a journalist almost my entire life. And I thought PR was going to be the realm for me. And I decided, I don't want to just sell things to people. I really want to find and discover solutions. And so early on, Black Enterprise gave me a shot at writing for them. I also wrote for some green architecture blogs. So this is probably my senior year in college. And then from there, my writing just evolved. And I continued to connect with various editors that gave me a shot. So thus far, I've been published in Fast Company magazine, The Root, City Lab by The Atlantic, and Next City, and a couple more. And currently, I'm in a data journalism program at Columbia University, and I'll have a master's in data journalism in May.
Wow, that is major. Congrats!
Thank you. It's a lot of work. It's a lot of work, that's for sure.
I can imagine. I salute you for continuing, like you said, a lifelong learner. And so how did you get started with ThePLUG? Tell us about that process.
Yeah, absolutely. So for me, writing on impact, people of color, innovators outside of Silicon Valley, and just knowing a wealth of entrepreneurs and engineers and people in this space as part of the individuals that were in my circle growing up, I just felt that the current state of the way that we've been talking about startups, technology, and innovation has been extremely one-sided. And I think from a journalistic perspective, there wasn't a lot of inquiry into what are people outside of Zuckerberg and Gates and Elon Musk creating that's substantial.
Right.
And so I was really one of the only folks that was writing on this space for a while. I think you had kind of spots in different publications like TechCrunch. I think you had like Megan Rose Diffney, who was starting to write on the diversity aspect, particularly when, Google and Facebook were releasing their diversity numbers. But for a while, I was kind of covering that beat. And so for me, I felt like there has to be more people, not just journalists of color or writers of color interested in this. As a whole, we should be trying to understand what's going on within the entire tech ecosystem, because it benefits us to have these kinds of discussion and this kind of public discourse. So the plug for me really came out of the frustration of not seeing enough representation in the daily news cycle, showing significance about the contributions of Black and brown people in this space. And so I launched the plug in April of last year, just as like a test. Let me experiment. Do people even want, to know what stories are popping up that feature people of color, what they're doing, what they're starting, where they live, what kind of money they're raising, what kind of partnerships they have going on. And to my surprise, it really became a thing. And so we're looking at, being here a little over a year and just continuing to grow. We've had great partnerships with Capital One, some other smaller business organizations, Airbnb most recently, and just a plethora of other folks that have come on board and supported our work. And so we're also walking into some original reporting pretty soon here, but that was really the impetus behind the plug. Like, okay, we have to be part of the conversation about this industry at large.
Definitely. And so what were some of I definitely want to get into the partnerships piece of it, because I've been seeing you flourish on social media. So it's been great to see. And just if you could talk about the first steps, like from idea to starting.
Yikes. I think there was definitely a period of time where I had to get out of my own way. I had this grand vision that I was sharing with my mentors and advisors about what I wanted to do. And I'm like, yeah, I want to build this software around data and I want to track these people and yada, 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 yada. And one of my advisors is Joey Womack, who runs Goody Nation. He's just a brilliant developer and entrepreneur. And he just called me one day. He's like, Sherrell, just get started. Just buy the domain name and throw out your newsletter. It doesn't have to be fly. Just put it out there. And that was the kick in the pants that I needed for sure.
Definitely.
So I started real scrappy. I started with like using good bits to create stories for about 7-8 months. I was a person that was doing these stories Monday through Friday. I would be up, and I was working full time at that time. I was on contract with Google Fiber. And I was literally like putting together every single newsletter, writing intros, sourcing stories, trying to do a little bit of reporting as well, and just managing all of it by myself as I was growing my audience. And yeah, that was, gosh, it just seems like it was so long ago, but yeah.
Wow.
Yep. And then I had some friends who volunteered and was like, hey, we'll wireframe this out for you, or we'll do some of the graphics, we'll create a brand identity for you. And so I was really blessed with people who believed in me early on. And not just, I think, the project itself, but just me as a person and just that I've executed in the past, and that I was bringing something of value to the Black tech ecosystem, but then also the larger conversation on tech as a whole. And I think they also respected that, I was serious about journalism and not just about like featuring Black people and saying, oh, this person's Black and they started a company. But we're very selective, for folks that don't currently read the plug. We're very selective about the kind of stories that we select. We aren't about hero worship. We're not about, this person just decided to create an app. That doesn't really, equate to success, right? It's really about, are you building a business? Are you building something sustainable where one day you will have employees, where you will raise funding, what have you? Are you building something that's going to be impactful in the years to come and that's not just here for the bandwagon ride? So that is, that's the ethos behind the plug. And I had to tell that story, so many times to folks for them to understand, like, well, I'm not just trying to create a run-of-the-mill newsletter.
Right.
I want this to be something that lasts and evolves and is beneficial to our community as well as the outside community.
Definitely, because I can say since I've met you, I've definitely been subscribed And that's I'm subscribed to a few newsletters, but I find myself finding out about different things, may have just breezed through before, but it's just like new information. So I really enjoy reading the newsletter. So you mentioned that you were working full time. So if you could just briefly give us a day in the life of Sherrell at that beginning moment, like just how demanding your day was, because this is a daily newsletter, and I know I do a monthly. I stress about a monthly.
Oh my gosh, the struggle, girl. Yes. So again, like I said, I was using Goodreads, which allows you to take articles or anything that you're reading from the internet and immediately sort of extract it and put it in the queue into your newsletter. So that kind of made things a little easy, but I also had to take time to read and make sure that what was being reported was accurate and also beneficial. And then I tried to start batching my intros and making sure I had intros to pull from when I was on the run. In the beginning, I talked a lot more about my life and my involvement in tech. So it was very personal. I talked about, hey, like my little brother just dropped out of school. He was going to be a mathematician. Now he's a comedian. And I'm like, I'm on my way to Seattle. And like, he and I are going to have a conversation about, the next step for brown folks of color. And, I tried to make it as personal as possible so people could also see my journey. And I was living in Charlotte, North Carolina at the time. And so the Southeast is not necessarily known for, outside of Atlanta, like you're not really hearing a ton about what's happening in, like Tennessee or, North Carolina, but you have these hubs that are ripe for innovation. You have the Raleigh-Durham Research Triangle Park, which, was voted one of the top cities for innovation and startups because you have a rich academic talent pool and you have these startups that are moving there that are cheap, and they're just bustling with venture capital. So, so I wanted to talk about those spaces as well. I wanted to talk about the conferences in Charlotte and what we were doing. So that was sort of the beginning of, the beginning of the way that I was starting to tell the plug story. And so I would go to work 9 to 5 every day. Sometimes I had events. I was working on sales and strategy and marketing with Google Fiber on contract. They're rolling out high-speed internet within the community, so there's a lot of community impact there. So every now and again, I might be thrown to a homeowners association to kind of talk about the impact in the community or help out with some initiatives that we have, whether we're going into schools and talking about careers in STEM. And then, I would come home usually at 10 o'clock at night. I'm up till maybe 1 or 2 in the morning, just trying to get the newsletter right. So it was usually a back-to-back day. And then I was also still freelancing on the side and writing the stories that I thought was important. And I definitely tried to reduce how often I wrote each month so that I could focus on the newsletter.
Right.
But for the most part, it was around the clock kind of thing. And then the only days I would take off were holidays when I felt like people should be with their families and not checking emails. So, so those were the early days. And sometimes some of them were hit or miss. I mean, you go back to the earlier newsletters, some of them were a hot mess, like no lies. So,
Growth.
And right. And not in terms of the general content and news value, but, in terms of like, hey, I might say, I'm on the road today, or, I'm heading to the airport this morning. I'm going to keep things short and sweet. I'm heading to this conference. I'll, shoot over a recap, after I touch down, but things like that. So, what was awesome was that the more recognition that we received and the more notoriety, and I think overall we focused on quality, I was able to bring on Tyler Young, who's an incredible editor. I met her in Charlotte randomly at a Bible study. And
I love her, by the way.
Yes, she just has such an eye and a ear for just everything creative and news. And she was a producer, a local producer at the local news station before. And so she really understood the space. And even though she was not specifically in tech, she caught on quickly and she saw the value. And she actually approached me right before I started the plug. And she said, I want to work with you. I don't know what you got going on, girl, but I want to work with you. So when I finally had a few coins in the bank and really said, you know what, there's an opportunity here for a legit business. Let me go ahead and start making some serious investments in this. I started bootstrapping, started taking on partnerships, and small, started off very small. So, brought her on as editor. And so she keeps me on game and really helps to take over. As I said, I'm in grad school. So, So we project manage through Asana, and we have our weekly calls and conversations, and then I go out and I chase the partnerships. So it's been a big help. And then I still do the Founder Friday message. So on Fridays, I'm still in that intro saying hello and talking about the space and talking about what I'm learning.
Yes. Yeah, I love Tyler too. She's my friend on Facebook, and I live for her status. I just live for them. But that is amazing. And even I remember your story about Asana. I'm messaging you like, do you like it? How do you like Asana? So now I'm just like getting into it. So shout out to you for that.
Thank you.
Definitely. So you kind of mentioned you were able to hire Tyler. So if you could talk about like well, how did you, one, the importance of an email is how did you build it up to that level to where you were able to become profitable?
Yeah, absolutely. So what I'll say is the first thing is I started off with my friends and colleagues whom I already knew would want to receive this kind of information. And so I might have started off with a list of like 75 people and then just allowed it to grow, and obviously leveraging and using social media. That's usually the best way. And then what has also been beneficial is like being on podcasts like yours. I think these very niche audiences that people have that are interested in innovation, they're interested in, how to grow their businesses. I think there's a beautiful movement around this sort of self-learning,
right.
And coaching and mentoring. And those have been incredible spaces for a brand like mine that is trying to reach people who are interested in what is the next way, what is the future, and how can I be a part of it? And so it's kind of been these smaller niche audiences that have really been part of our saving grace in the way that we've been able to reach out and connect with our audiences. And then as far as partnerships go, because I've been in the tech space, and because, I also, as a marketing manager for Uber, really learned the value of demonstrating value of our audiences, knowing who our audience is, knowing sort of the behaviors just based on the back-end analytics. And so I was able to wrap that into a story on what the plug represents. And that's the way that I approach my partners. And usually I already have relationships with people at certain companies. And so that really helps. We also added in an event in Charlotte around the Black tech entrepreneurship ecosystem. And so that really also helped to add to our, to our visibility within the community. And I've done just a lot of speaking, a lot of panel moderation. I've interviewed Steve Case, who founded AOL. I got a chance to host the HBCU at South by South initiative. I've worked with some pretty incredible foundations and organizations. And so any chance that I get to talk about what the plug is and what it does, it really allows an opportunity for people to, to sign up and learn more about it. So very grassroots. Again, like I said, this entire operation has been, through the fortuitousness of the partnerships that we've had. But early on, I was bootstrapping, so I didn't have a marketing budget. I kind of had to go for broke and leverage social media, share with my friends, make sure that my newsletter was optimized for people to forward the email, that kind of thing. So it's been a sort of a hodgepodge of various different strategies to ensure that we get in front of people.
And roughly how big would you, if you want to provide like numbers, how big is your, audience now?
Yeah, so we don't provide specifics, but we're in several thousands.
Okay, great.
And we've been focused mostly on content and awareness. I know that a lot of other publications specifically look to scale. I think right now, for the way that Tyler and I have been able to manage, we also brought on an editorial fellow earlier this summer. And so my focus was on let's build a quality product and make sure we have something worth scaling, with. And so, I always kind of have this conversation with Tyler about should we solely be focused on numbers? And the answer is always we should be focused on the quality of our product. And that so far has worked for us. And I think at some point, maybe we will, look at potential opportunities to build something that's substantial for the media industry as a whole, and then look at what kind of capital funding opportunities exist there. I think, but for right now, we're really focused on the quality of our work.
I love it. I love it. And I think too, one, it goes into play. Like sometimes we can get so caught up on like numbers in terms of like followers and, but people do forget the quality in the midst of that because not necessarily the numbers bring money.
Right.
So definitely, I could see that. So, what are some important tools that have been beneficial for you in the plug?
Yeah, I think from a technical standpoint, I'll go right back to Asana again because it rules my entire life. Um, I think it's been the best move for me and my team to just kind of keep track of our goals, keep track of where projects are, and just communicate overall. And I think for folks who are for the first time creating a business, organization is key. You
Right.
know, it is always key. And I think a lot of times, especially for people of color and founders of color, we get a bad reputation around our business practices not necessarily being sound. And so having a great project management tool or system is definitely key to success and keeps you organized. Especially, like I said, in the early days, I was working 9 to 5. So I needed a way to really I needed a system. I needed, whether I was using, Google calendars or what have you, I needed something to keep myself organized and on task. So I think that makes a big difference. Other tools that I use are just, your basic accounting software. I use Wave Accounting. So that kind of makes things easy for me when I'm looking at, money and business, management. And then Google Docs is the world, right?
Yes.
So from
You love
creating
that.
so from creating pitch decks through Google Sheets, which is super easy for me and my team to manipulate, to redesigning the website and being able to collab on a document, just storing everything, having everything in a cloud-based system has been super, super, super beneficial. Using things like Later to schedule Instagram posts. Hootsuite is old, but it's tried and true. Helps
Yes.
us with scheduling, how it helps us to schedule and get ahead of our social media. So those are kind of some of the basic daily tools. And then they're really inexpensive. Canva, where we're able to, create our designs, those super cheap tools, which, I as a business owner, I'm always trying to figure out how can I lower overhead because I'd rather
Right.
spend more money on talent, right? So I have a videographer that is absolutely incredible. So it behooves me to save money on the processes and systems that I can, use or outsource with technology, and then really invest in the brilliant minds that are helping me to make this brand something significant and high quality.
Definitely. I'm loving the videos, by the way, the Insta videos. I see them. So I'm like, how does she do this? Which leads me to my next question. Like, how do you balance you're in school, your business, and you're just doing the plug in school?
You know what? So that's a great question. Again, having my daily editor there is very helpful. We schedule a weekly call on the weekends, and so that we can go over tasks, we can go over what the priorities are, and then also identifying what is important in the news cycle that we want to make sure we get across to our readers today. And then from the video perspective, Corey Mack is my videographer, and actually he found me on Twitter, lived in Charlotte, and said, we got to do something together. So we came up with this idea of doing the Black Tech Friday update. So every Friday on Instagram, you get the top news stories that happen during the week about Blacks in tech. And I thought that was such a cool idea. And so we would meet every week and record the videos. And since I'm in school now, we've been able to do more words and text versus me doing sort of a full-fledged presentation. So that works for us right now, but I'm also looking forward to experimenting more with videos, since that's really, the medium that is going to be here to stay and grow, over the next couple of years. So that's kind of, the management piece of it again. Like I said, Asana has been, it's been a godsend, and I just have to schedule everything out. I have to, preserve some days just for business stuff. I schedule out emails. I use Boomerang for Gmail to schedule out my emails. So if I need to respond to partners or send a recap report to a particular client or partner, those things are handled, and we have a process and system for those things so that, we stay on top of it. But it really requires me, with all the, things that I have going on, it requires me to be extremely organized. And again, especially when you're doing business with big name companies, they want to see that your work quality is
Right.
not just public, but internal. That you know how to send a quality email, that you're keeping them on task, that you have a payment processing system that works well. They don't have to chase you down, that you have an attorney to, approve contracts, things like that. And all the people that I work with are extremely tech savvy. So it makes it easier that I can email my lawyer and say, can you look through this contract, yada, 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 and he'll put it in a Google Doc, share with me his changes, and we'll move forward. And then he'll bill me electronically. So that makes my life easier, that I don't have to go physically sit in a room with anyone.
Systems are key. I think that's what we've learned, having these systems in place. And definitely. So what guided your decision, to go to grad school?
That's such a great question, because I was vehemently against grad school when I graduated from undergrad. I was like,
wow.
I was one of those folks that was like, you could not pay me to go to grad school. But thank God I matured a little bit. So there were several things that really led me to this program. Number one, Columbia and Stanford are the only grad school journalism programs that have a data component to it. And I knew that I was extremely interested in this conversation around big data, as well as data science as a whole. And I thought it was interesting the way that journalists were cultivating data, creating databases, developing visuals of society in such unique ways.
Right.
And I also had some experience at Uber, being able to track and manage and figure out, well, in this part of the city, there's no access to public transportation, and that's where we're getting most of our rides. And being able to take that data to the transportation department and saying, hey, this community in this zip code, does not have access to transportation, and that affects their quality of life, because that means they're not able to get to a job, which, affects their economic mobility. And so for me, I started being able to connect these dots. And quite honestly, as I mentioned before, earlier in our conversation, I felt that what was being reported about Black and brown people was not being scrutinized. There was kind of a lot of these lofty statements. Everyone kept regurgitating the same facts and figures and numbers, and the same people were always being interviewed for the same kind of stories. I was like, why do y'all even bother? Just copy and paste. And then, change the title. Why do y'all even bother? I just thought it was so interesting.
That's true.
So I thought, we really need to focus on, finding data sets and developing data sets that could be useful for us as a community, and then for the larger audience of investors, public policy officials, or what have you, giving information that could potentially help change narratives and infrastructure in our communities, particularly where all we hear about is disproportionality and disparity. Right. And it's something I've talked about in the plug. I'm like, the world needs more Black data scientists, and we need more folks who are developing solutions on these issues. But part of the challenge is, if we don't know what those issues are, and we haven't identified gaps and been able to tell the story with numbers, then we can't expect entrepreneurs to build in those places and spaces. So all that to say, I knew that for me, my knowledge and information is going to be capped, and I needed to come back and gain the knowledge and information and skill set, and have access to the resources that an institution like Columbia University provides. And there's just a wealth of things that they have here in the academic environment. But also there's venture funds that they support in the name of digital journalism and new media. And so it just seemed like a good time. It seemed like a good time in our nation. Right. As well, with this election and all those kinds of things. So yeah, in the program, again, it's super intensive, but it's 10 months. And I thought, I can balance this and run my business, and then be able to apply my thesis to what I've been doing with the plug for the last year. So for me, it just felt like the next evolution in my journey as an entrepreneur.
Love it. So what do you think has attributed to your success thus far?
Gosh, it's so funny because I don't think I'm successful yet, girl. What? I will be successful when my student loans are paid off. So you call me when that happens.
I'm with you on that one. I am with you on that one.
Girl, the day that happens, we'll answer this question. No, to be completely honest with you, I think the most transformative change for me has really been in understanding that leadership really takes an extraordinary amount of self-examination and looking at what you value, what you're contributing, and just how purposeful you are with your journey. And I've realized, especially, I was in Charlotte. I was traveling with Village Capital on their Velocity tour, looking at entrepreneurs throughout Richmond and Charlottesville and all these places when Keith Lamont Scott was killed in Charlotte. And I remember the turmoil in the city. I remember marching in the streets and passing by the tanks. And I just remember feeling like this is history right now. And every single day of my life, I need to be dedicated towards changing this narrative, because I can't keep calling my grandfather and him saying, yep, this happened to us in the 50s. This happened to us in the 60s. Like, that's not the kind of conversation I want to have with my kids in 20, 30 years. And so that bothered me to my core, Monique. Like, it bothered me to my core that we're still circling around the same issues. And so I will say that just continued curiosity, a willingness to challenge my own biases, and then just to say, listen, I don't have all the answers, so let me go get the knowledge and the information, and let me start asking smarter questions.
Definitely.
And I always try to apply the lens of the way that I look at the plug. Like I said earlier, we could be completely focused on numbers, or we could be focused on these dedicated groups of folks like yourself who are like, I get value out of this newsletter. This is something I look toward, and us building on top of that. So like I said, I don't think I'm successful yet, but I am a much more evolved person than I was before. And I think that we don't have to continue as people of color to ask others for opportunity and for space. I think that if we invest appropriately and we look at our opportunities and take advantage of them, we can build $1 billion companies.
Yes.
And we can change our communities and our neighborhoods. And I mean, this is me standing on my soapbox, but
I'm here for it. Keep going.
Yeah, but I think that there's opportunity for us. And we got to be dedicated and committed. And we also got to question the way that we lead.
Definitely.
We got to question the way that we lead, and we have to stop thinking just money, hoes, and clothes, right? We got to be like, no, like, we need everybody in our community to read and have access to health care. And good jobs so they can feed their families, so we won't have some of these symptoms of poverty, right? So again, that's kind of the vein that I'm thinking in and working in right now.
And that's so true. I'm so glad that you said that. It reminded me of our last guest, Checkwas Okafor of OniCheck. But he mentioned that one of the important things for him is he felt like it was his responsibility to make sure that economic development through his business, providing those opportunities in Africa. And I think the more people realize that as people of color, it is our responsibility. And it's not okay for us to continue to say every day, the first. We're still saying the first person to do this in 2017. I think that's something to be discussed as well. So I definitely am glad that you mentioned that.
Yeah, absolutely.
Definitely. So what has been your most proudest moment thus far?
Gosh, honestly, getting into this university.
Yeah.
I think back to my grandparents, and I'm like, I don't even think my grandfather graduated from high school. And it was intimidating to apply. I remember literally, Monique, the day that I was going to submit my application, I almost didn't send it.
Wow.
It was literally like maybe the night of, a couple hours before the deadline. And I had been working on this application. I had friends editing my essays and, mentors, that wrote my letters of recommendation. And, I tried to be as honest in my process. Right. And I doubted myself. It was this moment of just sheer fear of, I'm going to get rejected and they're not going to accept me. And when I got the acceptance letter in March, I had to sit back and I just broke out into tears, and I called my mom, of course, and I'm talking to her, and she's like, you've been wanting to go to Columbia since forever. And the funny thing is, I used to leave my school. I went to FIT for undergrad.
Yes.
I used to leave my school and go to classes at Columbia. Like,
Wow.
I would be in there, sneaking in, going to lectures, going to all whatever public events they had. I was there. I was like, this is the kind of education I want. And so now to be here, to be a student, and then to know that like my grandparents are gonna watch me walk across that stage in May, it has just meant I don't take it for granted. I just don't take it for granted. So I realize like this is about creating legacy, even for my family, because I think sometimes, we are all so gung ho about let's change the community, let's get out here, let's help other people. But I think for me, I'm doing this for my family as well. So
definitely can't stop the purpose. Love it. I love it. Keep pushing. We are definitely behind you. And I hate to go like into the next part, but what has been your most recent or most memorable failure?
My most recent and memorable failure. Gosh, those are good questions. I would have to say, this wasn't necessarily a public failure, but this was very personal to me. I as I mentioned, I moved here to New York City from Charlotte, North Carolina, and I did a lot in Charlotte around creating and cultivating a Black tech entrepreneurship community, and I think that I was overzealous about people's needs and desires about what they wanted to see from local leadership. And so I foolishly set out and embarked on creating this huge grand ideal, and expected local leadership to support it, to fund it, and to see the value in it. And I thought I sold it well, but I didn't. I didn't. And I didn't have the patience to go through the challenges of, bureaucracy and internal politics. And, lots of folks like to sit and talk about problems, but not really do anything about it. So I guess it's just a therapy session that they're working on. I don't know.
That one's good.
Right. And so I'll say for me, it was a failure because I allowed it to, I got bitter off of it. I got bitter because I felt like here I am doing the work. I'm busting my behind. I'm working with dope people, and we're talking about a Black man being killed in our streets. We're talking about economic mobility being not even a chance in the Mecklenburg County. We're talking about race and disparity and all of these things that y'all created task force and policy, and all these committees and, your talk sessions, your therapy sessions. And yet here's a solution on the table that is, that's working. And you're pretending that you're supporting it, but not really. And, and so for me, it was a blow. It was a blow to my ego. And I feel like when I left to move back to New York, I got to a place where I was like, I'm done. I don't want to do it anymore. Why am I wasting my time? When clearly y'all don't even care. And so a friend of mine, after being here just a couple weeks, she said, you can't just stop. She was like, because you're not doing it for them, you're doing it for that young person in the city who has no other resource, but they look up and they see, Black Tech Charlotte as an opportunity for them to learn about entrepreneurship. And that's what led them to college, and that's what led them to create their own company. So she kind of set me straight in that. But for me, like I said, I felt like it was a failure on my end because I allowed that bitterness to almost deter me.
Right.
So yeah, girl, I gotta work that out through therapy this weekend.
It's gonna be okay, but we have our own, and the great thing is, I think, recognizing and, like you said, putting action behind when we recognize those things happening. So good to see that you're doing that and not stopping, because we are here, we support you, and it's needed what you're doing. So definitely,
Appreciate that.
Of course. And before we wrap up, what's something that you wish you would have known before starting?
Oh, wow. That's such a great question. I think for me, you never, when you start something, you have to be malleable. You have to be able to allow it to evolve, because you're always learning and growing as an entrepreneur. And so I guess one thing that, I wish I would have known, was just really in the area of talent acquisition. And really knowing where and how to source good talent. I was fortunate to have Corey and Tyler sort of seek me out, right, and kind of jump on board with me. But I think in the beginning, I spent so much time doing things myself because I felt like I had to, and not really paying attention to the fact that no, Sherrell, like these are awesome people, like not just on a personal level, but these people actually put in work,
right?
And so I think for me, like being able to identify that early is such a good muscle for entrepreneurs to have, because those are the people that are going to take your business to another level.
Definitely.
And they're gonna help challenge you and your capabilities and expand your capacity. So definitely wish that I would have had that sophistication early on.
Definitely. And what's in the future? What do you see as the future for the plug?
Yeah, for sure. So we're going to be rolling out some original content, more long form journalism, deeper pieces on what's going on in the Black tech ecosystem. So I'm really excited about that. And then also, like I said, I'm in grad school. I'm working on a dynamic thesis projects that have a lot to do with data and communities of color. So once that sort of completes in my studies, I'll be launching some pretty significant things.
Yay! We're excited. Well, it has been a pleasure. I do have a couple of fire questions before we go. But what advice would you give your 23-year-old self?
Oh gosh. You know what? My 23-year-old self, I would say, go get some global tech experience. So go join a boot camp or what have you overseas and find out how other people are thinking and building in another country. Because markets are blowing up, everywhere.
And the best gift you've ever received?
The best gift? Oh, that's so hard. Oh my gosh. Oh my word. This is going to sound really silly, but growing up in Seattle, we never had a circus. And so a friend of mine had gotten me tickets to the Universal Circus. And so I went in Brooklyn like a couple of years ago, and it was such an experience because I had never ever been to a circus. So that was a nice birthday gift.
Shout out to the friend. And your iPhone camera roll is full of what?
Oh geez, I've been working on these media projects in school, so they are full of homework assignments. And then my godson Nathaniel, if you ever catch my Instagram stream, I have pictures of him everywhere. He is the love of my life, and it hurts. It hurts to be away from him, but we FaceTime on Sundays, and he's 7 months old, and he's just a little firecracker. So it's homework assignments and Nathaniel drooling. So
yes. And what has been what do you recommend reads? Like, what's the recommended read?
So right now, I'm in between 3 different books. One of them is called Traction, and that's really all about startups and how do you capitalize on building the momentum based on what's working for your business. And that was an awesome book that a fellow entrepreneur gave to me. I'm also reading Ross Baird of Village Capital. I'm reading his book, which is due out next month. It's called The Innovation Blind Spot. And he talks a lot about the areas of opportunity we're missing to invest in diverse founders. And then also pushing foundations and corporations to make societal impact a part of their business strategy. So yeah, that book is blowing me away. I've actually almost completed it. And then I'm also reading a book by Krista Tippett. I just actually discovered her podcast a couple of months ago called On Being. And there's these super intellectual discussions about faith and humanity. So the book I'm reading of hers is called Einstein's God Conversations about the Human Spirit. And it's really interesting. It's just one of those, like, you kind of just want to sit back and maybe not think about business, but just think about, your thought process as a human being and, how other people encounter their faith and how faith fuels their work. Because I definitely know that it fuels mine. So that's right now are the books that I'm reading.
Noted. And lastly, what's the last item you splurged on?
Well, let's not even call this a splurge. This was, I was en route from Seattle to Portland and I cracked my laptop and I had to go to the Mac store for them to tell me my baby was dead. And I had to buy a new MacBook Air, but it was cool because I had my Columbia email address, so I got my discount, and I got a pair of Beats headphones. So
yes, student discount.
Yes, honey. So I was like, you know what? See?
Yes.
It was a blessing. It was
that is. I have to call my school to get access to my email because I still use my ID.
You see? Exactly. So that was my splurgy gift.
Yes. Well, Sherrell, it has been a pleasure. You have to tell the people how they can support you, how they can find you and contact you.
Absolutely. First and foremost is subscribe to theplugdaily.com. We are shooting out Monday through Friday the top news stories that are featuring people of color. Monday through Friday again, we have a hit list of, the top 5 stories and ways that you can get onto platforms like conferences, participating in accelerators or going to conferences. We list all that information right in that one newsletter. It's a quick read, doesn't take up too much time, but you see folks that look like you. And we reply to every single email. So from signing up, you can respond right to that email and get in touch with us. And then we're just, across social media, Twitter, Facebook, and Instagram _theplugdaily. And that's such a great way to connect and follow the journey.
Well, definitely, folks, you have that. Sherrell Dorsey, someone you should know. And of course, you can follow Black to Business everything at black2business.com. Be sure to rate, comment, and subscribe so that we can continue to have great guests like Sherrell and just give us feedback. So again, Sherrell, thank you so much and great luck with the rest of your studies and keep pushing the culture forward.
Thank you so much, Monique. This has been a real pleasure.
You're welcome. Have a good one.
You too.